What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be teaching you how to change the front brake rotors in your 1996 Honda Prelude, or basically 1992 to 1996, the 4th gen Prelude. Now you're going to want to start by just loosening the lug nuts in the front wheels. We're not doing the back wheels today, so we're just going to focus on the front, but if you were doing the front and back, you could either start by just doing the front and then finish it and go to the back, or do them all four. But we're going to go ahead and loosen these. That way when we jack it up, we can get the wheel off easier. To complete this job, you just need an assortment of hand tools. I have a dead blow hammer just to make knocking off the rotors a bit easier in case anything's stuck. Otherwise, you just need a screwdriver, a socket set, wire brush, knock off any rust, and some anti-seize when putting on the new rotors. Otherwise, it doesn't take that many tools, and it's a quick job to complete. Alright, so now that we got the wheel off, and I stuck it under the car just to make sure that I have a little bit added protection in case the jack stands fail. But now that we got the wheel off, the reason I am replacing these brake rotors is that I get quite a bit of shake when I brake hard, like when I'm coming off of an off-ramp or just slowing down quickly. Now usually you should replace the brake rotors and pads at the same time. Unfortunately, no auto parts stores around me had pads tonight, and it's most likely just the rotors that are causing the issue. I can go back and change the pads out soon here when I get some in the mail, but in the meantime I'm just going to be replacing the rotors today. I'll still show you how you can replace the pads, but tonight we're just going to be replacing the rotors on these front axles. So when looking at the caliper here, there's going to be two 14mm bolts, one down here, one up here. You're going to want to undo both of these bolts, and that will allow you to swing the caliper down so you can gain access to the brake rotor. So I'm going to go ahead and undo these now. Now that we have the caliper up there and stored so it's not hanging on the brake line, we're going to undo, there's two bolts back here. They look to be about 17mm. They connected to the steering knuckle. We're going to go ahead and undo those two bolts, which allow us to get this caliper bracket off. First, we're going to remove the brake pads, just pull them out, and then there's going to be these shims in the top and bottom. Make sure you keep track of those. But after we undo those two bolts, we'll go ahead and take out the bracket, and then we can remove this brake rotor. I'll go ahead and get doing that now. Alright, so we just removed these two 17mm bolts. They just came right out. They're pretty easy. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to slide this bracket off. Just going to set it right there. And this is going to allow us to get this brake rotor off. Now let's look and see. So usually these will have screws right there and there that you will have to undo to get the rotor off. It looks like in this specific case it does not have those. So we're just going to take this dead blow hammer here and we're going to knock on this and just get it loose, and then we can take this old rotor off. Alright. After a lot of banging on this thing with the dead blow hammer, I was able to get the old rotor off. Now, this is where I'd highly recommend cleaning this up with a wire brush and then putting some anti-seize on there to make sure if you do this in the future, you won't have to bang on it as much as I did. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and clean up the new brake rotor. They do ship it with a protective coating on it, but you don't want that when you're actually driving. So we're going to take some brake clean and clean that off, and then we're going to put some anti-seize on this hub to make the new rotor not stick to it when I need to take it off later. Alright, so we have a nice thin coating of anti-seize on the hub. We've cleaned off the brake rotor and got rid of all the protective coating they ship it with. We're going to go ahead and slide that on here and then get to working on putting the pads and the caliper bracket back on there. So we have the nice shiny new rotor on there. Now we're going to go ahead and put this bracket back up there and bolt it up. And one thing to note, because this rotor is thicker than the one we took off, those pads aren't going to fit if we try to put it back on without adjusting the caliper. So I'll show you how to do that in a minute here. Just one thing to keep in mind. So we're going to go ahead and bolt up that bracket again here. Now the two bolts that bolt this bracket onto the knuckle, you're going to want to torque these down to 80 foot-pounds. So I have my torque wrench here, and both of them have been torqued down to 80 foot-pounds. So now we're going to go ahead and put the brake pads back into here, and we can worry about compressing that caliper so it'll allow for the thicker rotor here. So with the pads back in, you can see that this caliper won't fit back on there. That's because now with the thicker rotor, it's not going to be able to fit with how it was set before. So what we're going to do, you can rent certain tools for this at O'Reilly or AutoZone. But with this specific instance, all you need to do is take a flat piece of wood or just something that you can set across this, this hole right there, and then you can take a C-clamp and just tighten that down to where you compress that piston to where it's flat. And after that's flat, you can then fit this caliper back on there, and it'll allow you to fit the thicker brake rotor. So we're going to go ahead and go grab a C-clamp and work on compressing that. Something you want to pay attention to is when you're compressing that caliper, it is going to force the brake fluid back through the system. What I'd recommend doing is go ahead and open up this brake fluid reservoir. Just go ahead and set that just like that. That'll allow it to have any fluid rise up without creating any pressure in there. So now that's open, we're going to go ahead and compress this piston with a C-clamp. Alright, so now we use that C-clamp. We can see the piston is nice and flush. That's going to allow us to slide this caliper back on there and get that bolted up here. So I don't have enough hands to do that here, so I'm going to go ahead and put that on the bracket, and then I'll be right back. And it's always a good idea when you're putting these caliper bolts back on, put a little anti-seize on them. It'll just make your job easier in the future, as well as on these lug studs. We'll put some on there when we put the wheel back on. So I got the caliper mounted up, went on just fine now that I compressed that piston, and then we're just going to bolt this this back in there and work on the other side here. All right, with the two bolts that connect the caliper to the caliper bracket, you're going to want to torque those down to 36 foot-pounds. I have both of those torqued down now. I got some anti-seize on the four lug nuts, or the lug studs I should say. I'm going to go ahead and wipe down this brake rotor one more time, and then we'll go ahead and mount the wheel back on there and we'll be done with this side. All right, so we're back on the other side here. I have my two sockets, my 17 and my 14. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side, and then I'll catch you when we're done with this side as well here. Alright, so it looks like we got this second rotor on there alright. Everything is torqued down to spec. We're going to go ahead and toss that wheel on there, and then that should be all set. Now, like I said, we only replaced the rotors today, but it's the same process, but instead of putting in the same pads like I did now, you just put in the new pads. But otherwise, everything should be all set here. Alright, so we finished that job today. Both brakes are in there alright. We're going to go ahead and take it out for a spin and just make sure that there's no more shake when I'm braking. If you do have any questions, go ahead and just put them in the comments below, and thank you for watching. One more thing I forgot to mention is once you do lower the car back down off the jack stands and jack, be sure to torque your lugs down to spec. In my specific instance, they're 80 foot-pounds, but your car might be different. But make sure you do that after you drop the car back onto the ground. Alright, catch you guys in the next one.